Welcome to day 3 of World War I, or the Great War. Today's topic is bloody stalemate, and the main overarching question is, to what extent was the German plan to invade France a success? Was it a massive success? Was it a small success? Was it a complete failure? Quickly, we're going to recap a few things that we talked about previously in this class. On day 1 and day 2, we talked about nationalism and how the different countries were really proud of their nationality. So German nationality made German people proud to be German. French nationalism made French people proud to be French. They had the feeling of élan vital that made them feel strong and brave and proud and ready to attack the Germans. The countries of Europe divided up into two kind of groups via their nationalities. Germany and Austria-Hungary were allied because partially the Austrians and the Germans both spoke Germanic languages. We talked about how Russia and Serbia allied with each other. Russia here and Serbia, this country down here, out of common nationality, nationalism, same language, same culture, things like that. We talked about how Russia and France made an alliance with each other, not because they liked each other, but because they both hated Germany. And Britain and France got over their centuries-long hatred for each other and became allies just so that they could oppose Germany. This little cartoon illustrates how the war started and how it expanded from one small little thing in Serbia to a big giant worldwide war. So Serbia is here and he says, if you touch me, I will. And then Austria-Hungary is threatening him. So he says, if you do something, if you make a move, I will. And then Russia threatens Austria. If you hurt that little feller, Serbia, I will. And then Germany says, if you strike my friend, Austria, I will clearly strike you. France says, if you hit him, Russia, I will. And then back here in the end is Britain. And he says, ho there, if you chaps, whatever it is that you do, I'm going to respond. So Germany's plan, as we talked about last time, was to invade France by sneaking through Belgium in a hurry, swooping through France, flanking around the side, and hopefully winning quickly. The plan was to do this in under a week. That ended up not happening. So what was the result of the German troops invading Belgium and France? The first result is that when they went through Belgium, the Belgian people, not necessarily the Belgian military, but the Belgian people resisted. They didn't appreciate being invaded. There was an uprising of Belgian regular people, civilians, non-combatants, not soldiers, fighting against the Germans as they passed through. This painting sort of exemplifies that. Known as Franc-Tireurs, the free shooters. These shooters were basically snipers in English, hiding in windows of the hotel, hiding in gardens, women, old men, sniping at the German troops as they came through the city, and they also setting up barricades and other things like that to slow down the German progress. The German invasion of Belgium, instead of taking a week, took a couple of months in some places, and it slowed them down enough that it gave the French time to prepare to face the German invasion. If you can tell here, the border between Belgium and France is actually right back here, and the German military got a fair ways into France here, making it pretty close to Paris. This says limit of German advance as of September of 1914. And this scared the pants off of the French. So the French government did the unthinkable, and they took all of the reserve troops, all of the troops that were guarding the city of Paris itself, and they sent them all to the front lines to oppose the Germans, to fight the Germans. Most of the military transportation vehicles were over here getting ready to invade Germany, so they didn't have military carts and horses and wagons and trucks and all the things you would normally use. So famously, the French improvised and they commandeered all of the taxis in Paris to drive soldiers from Paris to the front lines. This led to the Battle of First Marne. The Marne River runs right here. You can kind of see it there. And this is the first Battle of the Marne, where the French pushed the Germans back to here by December. So what was the result of the German troops invading Belgium and France? Well, the German military did succeed in invading France. However, it didn't exactly go as planned. This brings us to the race to the sea. Question number 2, why did the race to the sea end in trench warfare? So down here at the bottom of the screen, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Down here at the bottom of the screen, you have Paris, and the Battle of the Marne was right down here. Here's the Marne River, kind of cut off of the map a little bit, so give you a sense of where we are compared to the map from the last slide. The front line was pushed back from here to over here, and as soon as they got to about here, the Germans dug trenches, and these are our images for trench warfare. The French dug opposing trenches a couple of 100 yards in front of them, and rather than attack head on to entrenched soldiers in trenches, both sides hit upon the same strategy, that of flanking. So this map shows us how both sides tried to outflank each other. The French tried to flank this way to come around behind the trenches, but the Germans saw that and tried to outflank the French by coming around this way. And then the French outflanked this way. And you can follow the dates here, September 17th, September 18th, September 22nd, September 24th, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until you get all the way up here. It's October. And then we get all the way up here to the Battle of Ypres, Ypres. The Battle of Ypres is centered around this city, and the goal of this battle was to push the Germans finally out of France once and for all. It became one of the biggest early battles of the war. The British expeditionary sources crossed over from Dover. As you can see here, Britain is very close by. So British forces came over from Dover to help the French. There were Belgian troops also, and they together attempted to break through the trenches, end the stalemate, and come around back and defeat the Germans once and for all. Didn't quite turn out that way, although they did push the trenches into Belgium and out of France. The race to the sea, this flank, outflank, flank, outflank, flank, outflank little dance that they did, created a wiggly line of trenches that went all the way from Switzerland to the North Sea. It was called the race to the sea because both armies were trying to get there first effectively to go around this backside of the other. And it ended up with both sides digging trenches that would stay exactly like this, almost unchanged for nearly the next 4 years. So how did this trench warfare become a stalemate? Stalemate's an interesting term. It actually comes from the game of chess. You've probably heard of checkmate. Stalemate means that there are no moves that either side can make. There are no legal moves left for either side. Trench warfare became a stalemate because as soon as the trenches were dug, it was virtually impossible for either side to get any progress forwards or backwards. Once you dig these fortresses into the ground, they're basically forts but underground, they're really hard to get around and they're really hard to move. If you have one fort or a castle or something like that, you can lay siege to it and starve the people out. But trenches that go continuously across an entire country, there's not really a way to go around it. There's not really any way to starve them out. You can see in these images, the area between the trenches is known as no man's land. It's been depicted in lots of movies recently. The trenches on one side say the French, and the trenches on the other side, the Germans. There's no man's land in the middle, meaning that that is the land that neither side controls, also meaning that any man who goes out there probably will die. The trenches were pretty miserable. This picture makes it look a lot nicer than it actually was. Wet, muddy, dirty, dangerous. Yes, hiding underground is a good way to hide from, rifle fire, machine gun fire, but it is not any guarantee against artillery, cannons, missiles, things like that. You can see in this drawing from a little kid textbook, these little circles all over the place. Those are evidence of shells that blew up and when they hit the ground in all these places. That means if they can hit here, they can hit in here as well. You can see in this picture, it's a photo from an airplane. All of these little dots, these little white dots, those are also evidence of artillery shells. So you can see they're all the way back here. Even behind the trenches, you would not be safe. Why couldn't they just run straight over here, jump in the trench, and win? Well, because if you run over here, first of all, you're running through, here's another better picture, run over here and jump in the trench, you're running in the face of machine gun fire usually. You're running through mud, dead bodies, pockmarked, beat up land. You're getting through barbed wire, maybe. If you jump in the trench, let's say you jump in here and you kill all the men in the front line trench, there's still going to be more people in the support trench that can come up here and reinforce them, or people in the reserve trench could come up here and reinforce them. So if you able to attack and take just this one part of the trenches, reinforcements are going to come from both sides and from the rear to reinforce. And so the best case is you run over here, do some damage, and then you run back, and hopefully you over time kill more of them than they kill of you. Last question for today. How did industrial technology make war more deadly? Well, once the armies are entrenched, once they're in the trenches, and they're firing machine guns out of the trenches, it seems more and more suicidal to jump out of the trenches and run across no man's land to attack. One way to entice or to force the other side out of the trenches is to fire poisonous gas at them. German military does it first, but the French and the British also join in very soon after, shooting canisters full of poisonous gas, things like chlorine gas, tear gas, mustard gas, phosgene. It explodes nearby the trenches, and since these different gases are heavier than air, they settle down into the trench. In order to escape from the gas, the only way out is to jump out of the trench and run away, which is what the French did the first time they encountered this, exactly as planned. This poster on the left shows us a little piece of what is going to have to happen. It's put on, you can see the little caption, issued by the Chemical Warfare Service. And it says, learn to adjust your respirator, correct and quick. Don't breathe while doing it, and this won't happen to you. This guy's holding his gas mask in his left hand while he is suffocating. So soldiers now had to carry gas masks everywhere they went, just in case of attack. Other technology, airplanes were brand new technology, less than 10 years old when the war started, and they were used for the first time in war, partially at first for just spying, reconnaissance, taking pictures from the air, later on for shooting, and towards the very end of the war for dropping a few bombs, although as you can see from that plane, they're pretty lightweight, they can't fly very high, and they can't carry very many bombs. And then last but not least, the tank, invented by the British, was designed to very slowly overcome the trenches. It's an armored way to get across no man's land, although the early tanks only went about 4 miles an hour. But if you were riding in the tank, you were safe from most machine gun fire. All right, those are our 4 summaries for today. Plus, I recommend that you take your 4 summaries as is and combine them into a single excellent paragraph, including as much detail as possible, but limited to 4 sentences. After you're done with that, you should start the HEI assignment and interpret the evidence from the article, answering the question, to what extent was this invasion a success?